welcome back to another episode of Pulse of the Practice. Will Hill from Thomson Reuters and Paul Miller, Business by Design. Paul, it's fall outside.
You know, Will, even though our listener can't see this, I can see that from your backdrop. Very nice fall foliage you have behind you. So very colorful.
You know, I actually mispronounced that earlier today as foliage. I know it's foliage, but I just said it, and then I told people to put their tinfoil hats away.
But no, I'm good. It's fall. It's we're rolling through another year. It's crazy how fast you get to, that midsummer stuff and all the activities or whatever. And it is kind of weird, like, especially for the 9/15 deadline, you get to that and all of a sudden everything just quickly turns in another direction. It's crazy, but yeah, that's what it is.
So we're past all the tax deadlines for now.
Yep.
Except for those clients, the special ones that want a second extension.
The ones on a 5-year program, they come once every 5 years.
Yes. So let's leave those to the side for now. And what are some things, Paul, that you have learned this year about client needs, the tax prep process, all those things? What are some things you guys have learned?
Well, one of the things that's become extremely clear is that you do not need to physically meet with clients. I think that's been reinforced over and over again. As much as people, even when COVID first started, whatever, people were like, oh, meet in person, whatever. People just quickly adjust and get used to a different way of delivery. Now, again, we'll probably end up, I don't know, maybe we'll end up at 10% of 15% of the appointments would be in person, but we still see that as just one of those things that becomes temporary change into more permanent. The pacing of what you have with the relationship and the mechanisms you use to communicate with your clients really is just different now. And I don't really see that changing. I see that really being a lot of the same. And that's definitely, our clients have learned what system we're on. So we use Zoom for everything, and not promoting that, but I'm a minor, have a minor shareholder stake in that company. But
thanks for the disclosure.
But no, I mean, I think that's one thing, is like the nature of the way that you have a client relationship, I think, is constantly now evolving, and I just think that you have these moments to influence people. And I think you need to pick your moments, pick your moments of when you can get their attention and when you can actually make strides to do some kind of change. And so, that was one thing that for sure has been reinforced this year.
I love that with the pick your moments piece. There's been many conversations just from a personal example side, or we're talking to my wife about, hey, we need to talk to this person about X, or, our kids about this. And we just pause and say, is this the right time? Do we actually have their attention? Is there too much else going on? Do we see another time when it won't be too late that makes more sense and is more calculated? So moving that from the personal side to the business side, I think that's a good observation.
Well, yeah, and I think it's not everything is going to be the same type of call. I think you always have to have a purpose for that. So are you trying to get information from the client? Are you trying to get some kind of answer from them? Or are you actually trying to teach them about something else? Are we trying to move that relationship forward? And I think that becomes a little bit more of an emphasis on what you do with your clients, how you we've talked about this probably to death already this year, but manage the relationship, And I think that's an important piece. So,
yeah. There's another word you mentioned in there, and it was pace. Certainly the last couple of years, pace is interesting. Things have slowed down and sped up all at the same time. Yes. I don't know how that's happened, but it has. But what have you learned about your preparation pace as a firm?
Well, and I think what maybe goes hand in hand with this, that everything being more virtual, I think people are just more used to not going to the bank and having to get something, not going here, just the virtual connections of stuff. And so one of the things, we have talked a little bit before, Will, about is I have this thing now. Every once in a while I get these ideas or things, and this is my thing now. I know this is my thing now is, I really want to remove the client from holding up the pace of our relationship, the pace of how we get work done. And I think for a lot of firms, especially when you approach a deadline, we go through a 9:15 or 10:15 deadline, and the people you're dealing with usually isn't because of your own firm's lack of, getting on work. It's usually just the client gets in the way. And so we've been talking extensively over the past few months about what are the things we can do to remove the client from getting our work done. And people kind of laugh because you go like, oh yeah, if the client wasn't there, we could get so much more done. It's kind of like if your boss isn't around, you can get so much more done, because there are just no distractions or whatever people will say, like they get more work done. But the reality is the client does hold the key to how you pace and how you get your workflow paces. And I really want to remove that element of it. In particular, a lot of it is going to be related to bookkeeping issues, certain documentation, just getting the last pieces of information. It might be 10 or 15, 20% of the stuff you need yet, and it's held up by the client. And boy, that is a real strain on your resources if you can't circle the wagons to get a project complete, You there, Will?
So tell me, what are some things?
I thought I lost you for a second.
Hey, well, it's not out of the realm of possibility. But what are some things that you guys have already started talking about?
You were just looking at me. You were looking at me like, hello? Anyway, so I'm laughing.
Yeah. Well, you didn't have to tell the audience that. They can't see. They're only listening.
We take all this out during editing. Well, no one's gonna know.
All right. So what are some things you've already learned as a firm, or things you've talked about, say, hey, these are a couple things we want to try to do to execute in removing the client?
Well, I mean, one is we've had some clients just with some issues with their books. They've really wanted to maintain control of their bookkeeping, and we've kind of just gotten to a point and said, you're not doing it anymore. Now to do that, I will say in years past, I haven't had necessarily the bandwidth or the capacity to do it on a cost-effective basis, because I've mentioned in a couple other podcasts that we've done some outsourcing with bookkeeping. We're able to get it done on a much more cost-effective basis. So the bookkeeping is one issue. I just don't like hearing about the client has crappy books, that we've got to solve this bookkeeping thing because someone internally is holding that up. We're really trying to push hard to get that resolved, and that's one thing. The other one that goes hand in hand with that is we are actively working on scheduling in advance. So if you do have the clients that you would know their bookkeeping and their data, we are pushing really hard to kind of require them to come in at a certain time. And so I haven't figured out exactly the wording I'm going to use to certain clients, okay? But there is a capacity that you have during certain deadlines. So let's just take up to April 15th. There's only a certain amount of work we can take in. I mean, it's just what it is. And so what we're trying to do is make sure we're more clear on, here's what we can actually schedule to get completed. And then here's what would be maybe outside of a April 15th deadline or something that would be like on May, June or something. And try to prioritize that a little bit more. Honestly, we started doing this a couple of years ago. COVID sidetracked us for the last really 2 years. It's more important now than ever that we don't let the clients dictate the pace and the scheduling. We need to determine how many can we take in at a certain time, what's our volume capacity. And I know that from my staff, it's very important. That's an important topic for them to know, that they're just not going to be bombarded, or feeling like they have this pressure of deadline. I think that's a big thing right now.
So what's the value proposition for the customer, right, to get behind letting go?
Well, there's a couple things. So I like watching the Deadliest Catch. You ever watch that show? The crab fishermen guys?
Yes.
And not just guys, but ladies too. Anyway, so I always found it interesting that, they go out and fish, and then they got an offload date, and they have to keep that date. And if they don't keep that date, they get penalized. And it's interesting how they adjust their workflow based on all that. They have this kind of drop dead date. So I'm not saying that we're going to be able to get clients to adhere to an exact date and hold to that, but there has to be an incentive to be able to come in and say, like, hey, if you want to be prioritized, this is the time period we need to see something. Otherwise, you're going to be in priority group B or something. I think, first of all, getting something back to the client in completion and holding to a completion date is important. I think that's one of the bigger incentives. There are a lot of clients, and Will, you know this in working with firms, there's a lot of clients that say they want to get their taxes done, and they distract you, they bring their stuff in, but it's 80% in, and you're dealing with them prior to April 15, when it really didn't matter if the tax return got done. Okay, so what we want to be able to do, and we're going to analyze, all my accountants in charge has their list of names, and we are going to prioritize them. And then we're going to try to go out and say, hey, this is what we want to do. Does this work? So it's going to be a little bit of a hit and miss, but we have to do something to start actively getting ahead of the scheduling and forcing people to take action. The reason people wouldn't schedule maybe before is because their bookkeeping's not done or something else isn't complete. If I know that, let's just say it's the end of March and I know they're having problems with getting their books ready, now we might be able to offer assistance to get that done and say, hey, since your books aren't done, give them to us. We'll get it completed. We'll get you something back by the 1st of May or something like that. So we're experimenting with different things that we might be able to do, but I know something has to change. I just don't think the idea of like sitting back, waiting for the client to reach out to you. Like in the past, in all fairness, we'd send out an email, schedule your time. So you'd have certain people that would schedule, some not. You need to have your normal routine, but that's not a good way to control workflow. And we need to be more deliberate about how we want to pursue scheduling, and that's going to be one of our big motives this coming year.
What's in it for them when it comes to giving up control of their books? So what are some things from a messaging perspective? Say, hey, you've held on to your books, but you can't just tell them it's hurting us, therefore you have to let go.
And that's a good point. I guess I'm saying it more in the context, Will, that for them, what we've done with clients, here's what I've told clients. There's going to be a penalty if you bring in crappy books. Okay. The penalty is we're going to have to do it anyway, and we're going to charge you. The penalty could be that they're going to be put behind other people, timing wise. Those are the things. We are going to approach all of our bookkeeping clients as priority first. So I think to answer your question, that's how we're going to prioritize and say the clients that we do bookkeeping for, we can get those tax returns done relatively quick. But if we don't, we started this with new clients, and new clients want to do their own books. We still have an upcharge for bookkeeping cleanup. And you got to have that upcharge enough that it doesn't make financial sense for the client to do their books. That's where we're going with everything. You've got to gradually get that out of the client's hands, that if someone, let's just say you've got businesses that are $250,000, $300,000 of annual revenue or more, is it really worth it for them to, where they could outsource? Maybe it's a couple grand a year to get their books done. It doesn't even make sense anymore. And so I think getting people this mind shift changed. I think COVID has changed a lot more of that. More people are more acceptable that now everything's electronic. I get everything electronic. What do I do? I just sense that it's more relevant now to approach that type of topic. And then the other thing is, I think, well, just maybe, we've been too lax on certain people to say, hey, I don't care if you do your books or don't, we're going to charge you the same. This is what the price of the relationship is. It may go back to pricing. It may go back to that you have to go back and adjust your pricing based on that as well,
Yeah, those are good points, Paul. I think let's flip the lens just a moment from the client value to the internal value. And we've talked a good amount about staffing, about frustration, all those kind of things. And I think we have to really begin to reweigh revenue versus staff satisfaction and staff frustration, right? Say, for someone that says, oh, I don't want to take on more books, it's not that profitable for me to do the books. And if I make it profitable to do the books, then the clients aren't going to want it. I'm going to have the opposite effect that's here. But it can't just be about the profit of the books, right? It has to be about what is the impact that not having clean books, timely books is having on the rest of the production process, the staff's emotion, morale, all those things. I think you have to really kind of put some new scales down to weigh those things.
Yeah, and it's like I was saying, it's the stuff you deal with before a deadline. You don't deal with the easy stuff, before the final deadline on 9/15. It's the harder ones. It's the ones that are a little bit messy. They're got some holes in it, and so what we want to be able to do is get out of this mindset of like having to deal with these crisis issues. Why on God's green earth are we dealing with getting data from a bank to a QuickBooks file, as an example, at this day and age? Now, if it was 2015, okay, I could even go, okay, maybe, but like where we're at today, Will, it's when you think about it, how data flows and information and things sync, it's kind of ridiculous that we're even having to deal with that. And that's why I said you got to maybe just have a frank discussion with your client and say, this is the way our relationship's going to work. We need to remove you out of the bookkeeping process. Here's how it's going to work. Here's what your deliverable back. And then when you do spend time on your books, it should be more about maybe have a conversation about the reporting, maybe have a conversation about what's in their books. For most clients, if they sit there and do their bookkeeping, I'm just thinking of the small businesses and they got a few employees, they might do their books every other month or every quarter or something. What good is that? They're not really doing their books. They're doing data entry. Well, data entry is not needed anymore. What you have to do is you have to become, and so answering your other point was, I think of our bookkeepers becoming more bookkeeping reviewers and not doers, by getting rid of the data entry stuff and getting into more conversation about that. That is going to be the ultimate win for a client. So why would a client go from a $3,000 or $4,000 a year annual engagement to a $6,000 or $7,000 a year annual engagement? Because they're going to have better information. You're going to have better conversations. And that's why you got to follow this up with some other action item then, right? And then the frustrations of your staff, where you're chasing around history, we can start working more towards, hey, have we thought about this? I noticed this now is different. Or I see you were doing that. That's what I mean by getting ahead of that relationship. And I think you'll solve so many pressures internally for a firm if we're just not chasing that deadline all the time. And we've had plenty of deadlines we've had to chase in the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I also think from a client conversation perspective, ask them, why do you want to hold on to it? What's the value that you're getting? Chances are you can get them the value without them keying in data and keying it in wrong, right? I listened to a conversation of small business owners on a different social media platform, and one of them was just talking about how they liked doing their books because they felt like they had a better handle on how long the jobs were taking, and they were more of a services company, and how fast it was before they were running out of things in inventory and so on. And while those are good KPIs to be aware of, there's got to be a better way to know those KPIs than to do your books and pay your invoices.
Pay the bills. And I mean, think about it, like, how many checks do people write out anymore? I mean, it's just so like everything is automatic. And I think that's the push over the past couple of years, Will, is now when you really start looking at it and people are really honest with themselves about what it is they're doing with their time. And I just think that it's a lot easier conversation to have with people today than it was even 36, 48 months ago. I just see it continue, and it's going to continue to push in that direction. And I just, how expensive labor is, and to have good people in your firm, and how expensive it is to maintain them and keep them, I just don't know if it's worth chasing around these data points that can be synced up in a different way. It just doesn't make sense anymore as a business model.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Paul, for sharing some of the things that you're looking at there with your firm. I appreciate your time on that.
Hey, no problem, man.
All right.
Where are you off to now, Will? Flying into another city?
No.
Another event?
It's fall, just trying to watch some football where I can, so. All right. Well, thank you again, Paul. And to our listeners, we know there's more than one. We haven't counted them all yet, but we'll get there soon. Thank you for your time, and we look to catch you on another episode of Pulse of the Practice.